Kong, one of the titans in this universe, can punch really hard. I'm talking about the same Kong that had a full-blown fight with the actual Godzilla. Like, they had a whole movie about these two fighting. Like, this guy can punch Godzilla and damage him, which is incredible when you think about what Godzilla has withstood in the comics that are actually a part of the MonsterVerse. You know, Godzilla's been around for millions of years, and yeah, there's been plenty of events that have wiped out all life on the planet. Like, one of the impacts, you can Google yourself, I'm not making this crap up, the Permian impact. Godzilla apparently was right next to something or got hit directly by such an impact that wiped out the entire surface of the earth, or all the life on the surface of the earth. And despite Godzilla having incredible durability, Kong can still make him scream in pain with his raw punching power, implying that Kong is making a being scream in pain, a being that survived stuff that devastated pretty much majority of the life on Earth, this Permian impact. They even talk about it in the comic narration. It eradicated most life, but obviously Godzilla is still alive. In order to be a threat to Godzilla, even though I would agree that Godzilla is stronger than him in overall everything put together, but even then, I would think this would imply that Kong can hit with planetoid cracking power. Like, maybe he can't hit with the force to devastate the whole Earth, but maybe a smaller planetoid like the moon or something, based on the fact that Godzilla had to withstand this kind of stuff, even smaller moons like this. Or it just depends on how you want to look at it. Planetoid-ish trembling type of might, considering that he can harm and make Godzilla scream in pain with his punches. This would just change the game on what everything we thought we knew about Kong in the live action. What do you guys think? Oh, this video is just getting started. Am I going too fast? Not to mention he has axes or gear that increases punching power even further. But yeah, I haven't got to that stuff yet. Am I going too fast? My bad, y'all. I'm gonna get back to this later on in the video when it comes to Kong's might. Oh boy, giant monster battles. Don't you love watching them? Let's talk about Kong of this universe, of this live action universe. I mean, he's almost the size of the king of the monsters himself. I mean, in real life, we know of creatures that are pretty large, but man, wouldn't it be scary living in a universe with titans this big though? Like, you probably thought this Kong was impressive. I mean, this one was big too, but he's just simply not in the same league with this Kong. I mean, not only is this Kong bigger, but Kong, like, one could suggest that he's stronger than what his size would imply too, implying he's stronger than what he looks. A great example of how he's stronger than what his size would suggest is that when other beings that are pretty large too try to pull up on him, even when he's holding back, he can kind of push them off of him. Look at the gap in strength. Like this, for example, one shot in these beings. On top of all this, in his lore, he's actually evolving and getting bigger and stronger over time. Like, his size actually legitly increases. Because in this film's timeline, like, there was, like, yeah, I'm not exaggerating, there was like a literal timeline. And in 1973, he was a certain size here, but in more modern times, his size does evolve. And as of the events of the new movie, he actually grows from being 100 feet tall. 30 or 40 plus years later, he's confirmed to be 300 feet tall.
It's not every day you get to climb inside a 300-foot ape's mouth, is it?
Yeah, and his height is even confirmed here. Yeah, so he's over 300 feet tall. Narratively, they even talk about how he's grown in the past 50 years. They said he's grown triple the size since they observed in 1973, showing that he is getting bigger over time. It's even brought up here, for example, on how he's an adolescent. He grows stronger every day, so he does get stronger over time. When it comes to his lore, he's like basically the only of his species left when it comes to gorilla-type titan beings. Because back in the day, they talk about in comic lore about Skull Island thousands of years ago. No, millions. So it lets you know that his species can live a very long time. He's at least thousands of years old. These skull crawlers wiped out his species, and he was born near the end of this little war. Kong wasn't always alone there. There was an entire tribe of family. It was their paradise until these skull crawlers came. They laid waste to everything. That's why in the 1973 movie, you know, the movie set in 1973, this is where you see him battling these creatures and stuff. He's going to live for a long time if you just don't kill him outright, one could say. Kind of like how deities in fiction are going to live forever unless somebody kills them. You know what I mean? Kind of like that with Kong. Seeing his family get taken out like that, one could argue this is what gives him so much strength. All that rage would make anybody invincible, wouldn't it? Kong, he's really old, so it makes sense that he knows some type of sign language. He's pretty smart. Like, since he's a titan, he does superhuman things, and, you know, just from his sheer size, you know he's superhuman. It's pretty straightforward with physicals. I'm gonna get into that in a bit, but he has extra stuff like super senses. Let's analyze this titan's might. For one, he ends up getting gear, like in the newest movie. You see this glove? It increases his already incredible might,
making one of the strongest titans even stronger.
He even gets his own version of a super axe, like Stormbreaker. I mean, just a powerful axe that looks like it's made out of the same stuff that's Godzilla's species. Like, you see the energy around it. Like, you see this stuff right here? It seems like the axe is made out of that stuff. You know, it seems to be able to get more power from when he was at a Hollow Earth, for example, putting it here to charge it up. And it seems like that's the only thing that can really counter Godzilla's blast, because I don't think he would be able to take just a straight up direct hit for too long from these blasts. Like, there's plenty of examples of this axe being able to withstand the blast from Godzilla. Kong can put out a lot of damage with just his fist without no weapons, but he seems to like using melee weapons. But when this thing is charged up, it can increase the cutting power of this crap. He even used creatures as melee weapons. Like here, even when he was younger, made a tree into his own version of a bat to hit beings with. You get the idea. He would use stuff to improvise to make a shield. Like, you always see him using melee type weapons or the environment. In this occasion, his weapon was ignited. Like, he'll even get on his Kratos status and use these, like the Blades of Chaos, for example. Here's another example of his battle IQ with a boulder hitting it. He will literally prep and make traps. Like this, for example. I mean, look at this marksmanship. Throws it, direct hit in the head. He's strong enough to effortlessly toss trees. Like, easily throws them that far. When it comes to his strength to toss helicopters, or he just has the brute strength to rip a helicopter in half. I mean, without wasting any time, just off gate, he has to be strong just from his sheer size. Godzilla has a confirmed weight to be over thousands of tons, 80 plus thousands of tons if I'm talking about. They're literally the size of buildings. The same should apply for Kong. Even if you want to argue he's smaller, he's got to be within that 50,000 ton range. So off gate, you know he has to be able to at least lift 50,000 of tons. All this size and just raw muscle is part of the reason why he can punch hard, which I'm going to get to in this video too. But yeah, lifting. I mean, right here, he was smaller, but it's shown he's consistently able to lift up beings like himself, size-wise. And when it comes to super thick chains, even when he's smaller, when he's only 100 feet, he's 300 feet currently, but this is back in the day, he's still strong enough to break chains even back in these weaker days. One could say he's not even fully mature days. It's a waste of time to even shoot at him, honestly. Like this being known as Mecha Godzilla, we've seen Kong stop his attack with his brute strength. This is one arm. Mecha Godzilla was super huge. You see him pin him. I mean, look at him lifting his big beast above his head. He can rip them in half with his power. This is clear evidence of his strength. Literally with one arm, these big beasts that are not quite as big as him, but big enough. They're almost his weight, I would say. He can still lift them up. You can literally see him dragging big, huge beings like Godzilla. A good example of how he can sling beings like himself in the air, then catch them with one arm, beings that are huge like him. I just don't see no reason on why he wouldn't be able to lift 100,000 tons or more. You know, if a cruise ship landed on him, there's a good chance he might be able to lift it, you know. I mean, we literally got some bare minimum numbers on what his punching power would have to be, even in his weakest days. Just a bare minimum. They talk about how helicopters are made of titanium, and Kong would have to have a bare minimum of 150 tons of force. They even go as far as saying he can do this stuff like with ease, like fruit flies. It's like implying this is nowhere near his max when it comes to his strength. So his punches being able to do stuff like this, the buildings are no duh. Even in his weakest 100-foot days, his punching power is evident on how he does helicopters with punches or stomps. This creature right here, for example, he just squishes with a stomp. Comics that are a part of the same universe that expand on the mythos more, like his punch shockwave can make people or just things in the vicinity fly just from the collateral of his hits. I mean, when it comes to just him being a beast, he has a reputation in general of being one of the strongest titans. And all this reputation seems to add up when you look at his battle feats. But let's be honest. It's kind of disrespectful to say his punching power is only 150 tons of force at max, especially when he's all the way evolved. I mean, it just wouldn't make sense. Think about it. He's battling beings that weigh literally 90,000 tons, and that he's supposed to be able to kind of match them to some degree with his punches and stuff. So it wouldn't make sense for his punches to be 150 tons at max, right? Critical thinking. There's humans out here that weigh 150 pounds, right? That can punch with 500 pounds of force, and they only weigh 150 pounds. If he weighs 50,000 tons at least, why on earth would his punching power be only 150 tons at max? Like, he more than likely can hit harder than what his weight is. We've seen him pick up stuff heavier than him, or is the same size as him. He's actually stronger than what he looks for his size. He's actually stronger than what he appears. Off default, he has to punch with way more than 50,000 tons of force. I mean, you guys know buildings can weigh thousands or hundreds of thousands of tons. These beings are literally punching through these type of things. I mean, beings that are literally similar strength to him, one could argue Kong is even stronger, can lift this type of stuff up, and they have to be able to hit somewhere in this force. They can literally lift up big chunks of buildings. Kong can punch through it. You get the idea. Sure, he did this with his glove. This is one of those things I definitely believe he could have done this without his glove. Either or. It's one of them situations with a single punch, he would easily be able to punch through multiple buildings. It seems like nothing to these beings. They're literally the size of this stuff. Besides, Kong is still just considered a threat without this. I mean, the only reason he had this anyway, because he got frostbite from this super powerful legendary titan, because this being can literally shoot with absolute zero beams. He wouldn't have needed this glove if he just didn't get hit by this. But yeah, this being was broken up. So glove or not, his punches will be able to quake, destroy buildings, knock several of them over. You get the idea. with ease. I mean, if we want to be technical, you remember this ship he was on? Him just tugging at his chains made this whole thing quake, just to let you know that he can hit hard. And you see this big old thing that Kong and him was standing on, like this aircraft carrier thing? Like, this thing is huge, and he quaked this thing. I mean, one could argue this thing he was standing on weighed more than him, and he's able to shake something this heavy, which is over hundreds of thousands of tons, of course. It wouldn't make sense if his punches couldn't hit with hundreds of thousands of tons of force at this point. They literally talk about their fighting on the aircraft carrier. This is the type of stuff he can quake. He can quake aircraft carriers. Hundreds of thousands of tons. I think we all can agree that in overall just powers and overall raw power, I think we all would agree that Godzilla has him beat. Without his axe, there's not really no way for Kong to counter that atomic blast other than just dodging. But like, they made a whole movie of Kong and Godzilla fighting. Like Kong versus Godzilla, they made a whole movie about that. He got to be somewhere in that ballpark of power. Consider how durable Godzilla is, this kind of makes Kong look more impressive. Like, they even talk about the name Godzilla versus Kong. They call Kong a heavy hitter along with calling Godzilla a heavy hitter. This basically talks about, when it comes to the King of the Monsters title, that Kong is so strong that he can, one can say, threaten the title, threaten Godzilla for the title. It literally says he threatened his rule because they're both alpha titans. Even in an environment where he's not really great at fighting underwater, he headbutts Godzilla here, punches him here, and shoulder hits him here. Mechagodzilla, a being that's even heavier, he's using his axe to stun this being. And this is probably one of the most impressive feats of all time. He hit Godzilla so hard to where he actually yelled in pain. Do I even have to mention how many times Godzilla has been hit by nuclear explosions or bombs, guys? Yeah, if he can make Godzilla scream in pain and nukes couldn't do that. So let's cross out 100,000 tons because that's being disrespectful. A nuke can hit with 50 megatons of force. 50 megatons is the equivalent of 50 million tons. So as a bare minimum, for you to be able to make Godzilla scream in pain like that, as a bare minimum, he would have to hit with probably over 50 million tons of force, like nuclear bombs, basically. Just putting into perspective on how hard these titans can really hit for him to make Godzilla yell in pain. After we know all the stuff Godzilla has withstood. Godzilla weighs over 80,000 tons, and we've seen him withstand falls from freaking orbit, guys. The bigger you are, the harder you fall. He literally fell so fast that he ignited the hydrogen in the air to where it was flames. I mean, look at Godzilla being right next to this nuke. Point blank, like this. And this didn't make him scream in pain for what we know. Yeah, so 50 million tons of force seems accurate for Kong to be able to hit that hard based on Godzilla's durability and stuff, you know, which this is equivalent to 50 megatons, by the way. Meaning, as a bare minimum, his punches would be able to quake a small city, a medium-sized city, technically based on how heavy his swings are. I want you guys to remember when Godzilla was completely drained because he got hit with an oxygen destroyer. Yeah, that's pretty hexy. A cheat code weapon that messes up the oxygen in the area. So he was pretty freaking drained. He's this drained. And nuclear explosions this close to him don't finish him off. If nukes was his limit, you would think that would be enough to finish him off when he's literally drained and weakened. But the fact he's able to withstand this while he's drained lets you know that nukes are nowhere near his durability limit. Matter of fact, the nuke's energy just revived him, really, the radiation. It just lets you know Kong being able to do this to Godzilla just says a lot about his raw power. And then we're not even going to talk about when he has his axe. One could say, depending on how much energy is charged up, it can increase how potent it is. Like right here, for example, it wasn't charged up. It can still do some damage, but when it's charged up, it can cleave through this being with its cutting power. Added on piercing damage and stuff like that, his strikes are even harder with this axe. And then there was that time Godzilla got amped up by incorporating this being Tiamat into his DNA. Not to mention taking over its lair that's a great stockpile for energy absorption, which Godzilla used to power himself up. Like, I'm talking about Godzilla was literally soaking and getting more energy, evolved to another higher state. To the point they actually gave us numbers on his stat increases. Everything about him increased. His skin, his molecular density increased, implying his durability increased, and he already could withstand nukes. If his durability increased as much as his energy capacity is, there's a good assumption that could be had that that's what happened. His energy capacity is magnified times 20 more than normal. If his durability is 20 times normal as well, you guessed it, guys, that would just make Kong look more impressive, especially when he got his new glove amp. It was in this occasion where he wasn't really trying to fight Godzilla. He was trying to tell him something, but he wasn't understanding him. Not only is Kong able to withstand being tackled by Godzilla through a pyramid in this amped up state, might I add, there's implications that Kong's punches, especially with his glove on, can affect him in this state to kind of knock some sense into him to make him listen. Even when the fist that doesn't have the glove on, you see him actually still being able to stagger him. Right? Like, he didn't win this fight or nothing, but if we assume that he can hurt him even though he's 20 times amped up more than normal, that would bare minimally mean that his fists would have to be 20 times heavier than they usually would be or something, or 20 times heavier than nuclear explosions. So remember how I said he can punch with bare minimally 50 million tons of force because that's what a nuke is? This is equivalent to 50 megatons. This times 20 would be substantially above nuclear bombs being a billions of tons of force, or one could say 1,000 megatons. Yeah, he would sink a few cities with punches like this if we're being honest. The equivalent energy behind these fists. This monsterverse in general has several novelizations that expand on the mythos of the lore of these characters, and they kind of describe stuff with more detail more than normal. They imply that Kong can hit with the force to lay waste to a mountain, so this billions of ton stuff kind of does make sense. This will further back up this billions of ton stuff, him being able to quake mountains. It makes sense with his lore so far, being able to punch with nuke force and stuff. You know, mountains can get kind of heavy, and it's pretty much confirmed. He can punch with the force enough to delete stuff that weighs billions of tons, because you know mountains can vary in size, but there's certain mountains that can weigh billions of tons, you know, implying he can punch with mountain shattering force. There's been a lot of Godzilla being brought up in this video, but what if I told you it gets even crazier when it comes to possibly figuring out Kong's punching power? Because Godzilla's been around for a long time. I'm talking about millions of years, and there's been like several events that has occurred that have wiped out a lot of life on the earth and stuff, or the planet, and Godzilla has survived this type of stuff. Like, this comic implies he had to withstand an impact that wiped out 90% of the life on earth, a surface wiping attack, and apparently Godzilla was able to withstand being right next to something like that, a direct hit. Like, you can actually Google it yourself. This Permian impact was worse than the asteroid that caused the extinction of the dinosaurs, guys. Something like this could be estimated. It could do a lot of damage to smaller planetoids like a moon or even smaller moons if it can do catastrophic damage to a planet this large. And Kong is able to punch Godzilla and make him yell in pain like this. Stuff like this would imply there's a chance, since we know Godzilla survived that incident. I'm talking about the asteroid landing on top of him. This type of stuff would imply that this version of Kong could possibly devastate a smaller planetoid. Not necessarily the Earth, but like maybe a smaller planetoid like the moon with his punching power. His punches would have the similar equivalent energy to be able to cause devastation to a planetoid like this. Or even one could just say an even smaller planetoid, like maybe not the moon, maybe something even smaller. Like, it just depends on how you want to look at it. Like, different planetoid size things. This right here can just overall change your perception or the punching power you thought the limits of these monsters in this monster live action universe had, being able to devastate smaller planetoids or something. Kong should technically be able to do something similar if he can compete with beings like Godzilla. Even if you want to say Godzilla got the advantage, he shouldn't be that far behind when it comes to just raw, blunt, concussive striking power. The stuff that Godzilla has withstood in the past millions of years ago, he's more than likely gotten stronger since then, and he withstood impacts like that back in the day. And Kong is fighting a current Godzilla. You see where I'm going with this? It just makes you change your opinion about these monsters in this verse so far. Seriously, Google the impact of the Permian impact. It was a mass extinction, guys. Like, I'm talking about enough power to crack multiple continents type of stuff. Stuff like this would imply that Kong's punches could have the raw energy, the equivalent energy enough to shake multiple continents, even mess up multiple continents. That kind of force. And yeah, his strikes get worse with his axe. So what do you think his axe strikes can do? You see where I'm going with this? It gets crazy for Godzilla and Kong in this universe. He has a lot of fighting experience handling other different type of creatures. Even like this Leviathan type creature with his blade, battle IQ and everything put together, took care of it and got some lunch from it. But what do you guys think? Do you respect Kong's might? How strong do you think these Monsterverse characters will get? I mean, the franchise is still relatively new in my opinion. We've literally seen him and Godzilla face off against beings or kaijus that have enough blast power to cause a literal ice age to the planet itself. Like, I'm not playing. Like, that's the type of stuff that he has to combat against.
Her power covered the Earth in the last ice age.
What do you guys think? Do you respect Kong? I mean, he has his own crew of apes now, along with him having an ice being that's cool with him now. Respect his raw battle IQ with his strength. The only main weaknesses I see him having in comparison to other titans like the man, the myth, the legend himself, Godzilla, the king of the monsters, is that without his axe or special gear, he can't seem to withstand too many blasts or extended blasts from Godzilla's atomic breath for too long, I would say. He has to avoid this. Like, when it comes to elemental stuff, like absurd levels of cold, it seems like Godzilla has better resistance against this type of stuff. Because we've seen Godzilla get blasted or way worse with all this ice, and he was able to counter and just bust out. Those seem like to be the only disadvantages, I would say. When it comes to this absolute zero stuff, it seems like this glove helps him get more resistance to this cold type of stuff, using it as a shield, one can say, against this cold. I guess you can say, since this is technically a permanent power-up or part of his gear, that would permanently give him some defense against this type of stuff. But before I get going, everybody, I gotta give a quick thanks to you all that have donated. It helps out a lot. Respect Kong. I'm glad you are enjoying your time on the channel. Make sure you check out the playlist on the channel to see other How Strong videos. If you like what this channel is offering, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys later.